Nidus Prime, a warframe that I have not paid much attention to, but after his retouch that came with this new update, 60,000 plus health, casual, nukes enemies by stomping down on the ground and suddenly does millions of damage with enough stacks, casual, and you have exploding maggots that do a ton of damage, not to mention red crits with certain augments and huge damage boosts with strength boosts. Yeah, Nidus is a hell of a, in a much better place right now, I'm gonna be honest with you guys. So you're going to be very interested to see what's new with this warframe, so we're going to get into it because it's actually quite exciting. Very quickly, there are some minor stat changes. Nidus's base health on the base frame and the prime frame are increased a little bit, and his innate health regeneration has been doubled. Let's talk about mutation stacks. This is very important to understand, because if you don't understand this, then you will not understand anything about this warframe. Nidus works on mutation stacks. This is unique to him specifically. In the bottom right of your screen, there is a gauge that is divided into 5 sections, or the 5 bars, which represent the number of hits dealt to enemies via your ability. The counter in the center is your total mutation stacks, which can now go up to a new maximum of 200 mutation stacks at base. As you hit enemies and you use your abilities, the sections or the 5 bars will light up. Once all 5 are lit up, the gauge will complete the cycle, and then you gain 1 mutation stack, and then it will reset. So all you need to know is when you damage an enemy with an ability from Nidus, you will gain 1/5 of the gauge in total, and 5 hits equals 1 mutation stack. But here's how you actually scale it. Each enemy hit by your first ability from direct hits and damage over time will gain 1/5 of the gauge. Each enemy killed by his second ability will have a chance to guarantee a full stack. We'll get into that later on. Each enemy hit by his fourth ability and the maggots will also give you 1/5 of the gauge. Now, even though I've been mentioning, you got to deal damage, it's kind of weird. Abilities are actually not required to deal damage per se. It's actually more about ability contact that is needed to increase mutation stacks. Bit weird, but that's pretty much how it goes. If you stand in a nullifier bubble, you will lose 1 mutation stack every 2 seconds, which will ramp up more and more the longer you stay in the nullifier bubble. Mutation stacks will also affect Nidus's abilities, but we will get into that later on. Let's finally talk about the passive. Nidus's passive is called Undying. If Nidus suffers fatal damage with at least 15 stacks of mutation, Nidus will consume the 15 stacks to avoid bleed out, and you gain 5 seconds of invulnerability while restoring 50% of his health. That's fantastic, that's great. Now, the thing that I want to bring your attention to is the augment, which is called Abundant Mutation. The new version of this augment will increase additional mutation stacks to 300 on top of your base 200, meaning we now have 500 stacks. However, when you use this augment, Undying will have a 30-second cooldown when you basically take lethal damage. Still, all in all, 500 mutation stacks makes for some crazy builds, which we will get into later on in the video, but I must say it is a massive damage increase to Nidus, like holy crap. Nidus's first is called I never know how to say this word, Virulence? I'm gonna say Virulence. I'm gonna go with that. Stomp the ground, sending out this line of fungus. You can hold down the ability to see actually where you're casting it or what the column is in a way. It's a 16 meter long column and a 4 meter wide. It's a 16 by 4 meter. That's all you need to know. Enemies are staggered when they're hit. They take puncture damage, and each time enemies are damaged or hit via the new damage over time mechanic from this ability, you will gain a mutation stack. The more mutation stacks you have, the more damage you do with Virulence, especially with the increased mutation stacks and the new augment, or the augment for the passive. Virulence now deals damage over time for 5 seconds, refunding 10 energy for each enemy hit, only on the initial hit, not the damage over time now. If you hit 4 enemies when you cast it, you will fully replenish the energy cost. If you hit more, you actually gain energy, which is quite nice for energy sustain. Virulence now also scales with ability duration, and Virulence will also explode the maggots from Nidus's fourth, which we will get into in a moment. Teeming Virulence is the augment. When you hit more than 4 enemies or 4 enemies, you will then gain increased primary crit chance for weapons to 200% at base, scaling with ability strength. This is huge for easy raid crits on primary weapons, and this bonus is increased with ability duration. Like, yeah, this is great. If you want to go for a gun buffing setup, you can definitely use this augment. Let's talk about Larva, which is the second ability for Nidus. Guys, it can be recast. I didn't know much about Nidus, but if there's one thing that was good or that many people use was Larva, and the most annoying thing was having to build for a low duration setup, you can now recast it. This is honestly the main thing that I'm happy about, and was pretty much the most annoying thing about this ability. Here you send out this ball that when it lands wherever you're aiming, it sends out tentacles that latches onto nearby enemies that are in line of sight and grabs them and pulls them into the middle within 12 meters at base range, ragdolling the enemies and just holding them there. When enemies are grabbed and affected by Larva and they are killed from any source, you will have a 50% chance at base to generate 1/5 of a mutation stack. With 200% ability strength, you can actually guarantee a full stack from killing an enemy. This is a huge quality of life for mutation stacking on top of the virulence changes as well. Combining this with virulence is the best option since you hit them the most, and then you can kill them with your weapons or with virulence, and yeah, it's just great. You gain so many mutation stacks now. It's a great grouping ability, and more range means more enemies, so you want to stack range with this ability if you want to go all in on it. The augment is called Larva Burst, which by the way is a hell of a lot better right now. Whenever you cast Larva and reactivate it, it will explode, dealing toxin damage. More ability strength means more damage. What the augment now does after the retouch is it now applies one guaranteed toxin status effect for every enemy that is grabbed. This is much better since before it would only apply one toxin status effect regardless. So now you have a massive toxic explosion if you grab a whole lot of enemies at once, and trust me, the damage scales to quite high amounts. It's very good. We have a build for that later on, just stay tuned. Now let's talk about Parasitic Link, Nidus' third. What they've changed with this is it now costs energy to cast, which is very nice. You can cast it onto an ally, warframe or companion within 40 meters, or you can cast it on an enemy within 20 meters. The link will persist as long as Nidus and the target remain within range of each other, lasting for 60 seconds. You can reset the duration by recasting the ability on the same target if you'd like, or you can manually deactivate the ability or move to another target by recasting the ability onto another target. When you are linked with allies, Nidus and the target receives 25% ability strength and bonus damage. The strength bonus scales multiplicatively, which is huge, and the damage bonus is also multiplicative with serration bonuses. When you link to enemies, the target will become incapacitated. Nidus gains 50% damage redirection while linked. All negative status effects and knockdowns are redirected as well. Damage redirection is capped at 90% with 180% ability strength. The target will be immune to outside sources of damage and immune to external crowd control effects, but not immune to effects and damage from you as Nidus. All external damage is stored and dealt in full when the ability ends. Parasitic Link will synergize with Virulence. When linked to a target, Virulence will spawn a second instance that will form from the linked target and will grow towards a set location. You can actually see this if you hold down Virulence while linked to a target with Parasitic Link. This second Virulence will also add to the mutation stacks. Linking with a teammate or enemy that is close just adds to Virulence and just adds to more mutation stacking. It's very good to pair these two together. My advice, Parasitic Link shines the most when you use it on a specific teammate or a friend with a warframe that benefits a hell of a lot from more strength. Like, let's say you have a Nocco on your team and you literally link with Nocco, then Nocco will then throw down Bright Bonnet, which will then bounce off of each other to gain ridiculous strength scaling for you and your allies. You can also link with tougher enemies so that they absorb all the damage or more damage when you are trying to redirect the damage dealt to you. Parasitic Vitality has been unchanged, it stayed the same from the retouch. When you link with an ally, you gain 4% maximum health per mutation during Parasitic Link. And let me just show you what this exactly means. That's right. We have more base mutation stacks, and then we also have abundant mutation, the passive augment that allows us to reach a maximum of 500 mutation stacks, which means the percentage max health gained from this augment is just goes to ridiculous amounts, and also that percentage is also increased with ability strength. The bonus scales off of base health, so Archon Shards are a good idea to increase the base health, and also Arcane Blessing. This augment does count as a vitality mod, meaning that you cannot use any other vitality type mod when you use this augment. When the link breaks, there is a 5-second countdown before the vitality bonus drops. This is if you want to go all in on huge amounts of tanking potential, this is the augment to go for. Let's talk about Nidus's fourth, the one ability out of the whole retouch that actually got changed the most technically. Consume 3 mutation stacks in order to cast Ravenous. Nidus will spread this Ravenous infestation that surrounds the nearby landscape. It will create spawning grounds that linger for 40 seconds. When inside this area where the grass and so on is, Nidus and allies will regenerate 75 health per second, and each time they are healed, they are cleansed of status effects. This can be increased with ability strength, the amount of health gained per second. Only one spawning ground can be active at a time. Recasting Ravenous while on the current spawning ground will refresh its duration without relocating it. Very important, and we'll get into that in a second. Ravenous now also scales with ability range. When you cast this ability, 3 infested nests will erupt on the edges. Each nest will spawn 3 maggots that are your allies, and you'll have a maximum of 9 active maggots in total. These maggots will draw enemy aggro. Once you cast it though, this is the one thing that I don't like about it too much, and I'll explain why, but at the same time I understand, and it's still very, very good. But when you cast it, there is a 4-second delay before the maggots will start moving at all and, start moving towards targets. They kind of just hang around for 4 seconds, which is not ideal, but it's okay. When a maggot dies, either from being hit and it loses all of its health, or Virulence, which is your first ability, it will explode, dealing blast damage within a 4-meter radius. However, the more mutation stacks that you have and the more strength you have means the more the maggots will deal explosive damage. Maggots are counted as summons, which means Summoner's Wrath, Camisado, Theorem Infection all affect the maggots. They are also affected by Nourish, and they will burst with viral damage, which is good for priming, and they stack Arcane Camisado as well. Like I mentioned briefly earlier, maggots that are hit by Virulence will immediately explode. It's good for manually detonating where you want to, which ones you want to do. But if you hold down Virulence while the maggots are around, you can actually see where they are, so you can kind of gauge where to cast Virulence. Exploding maggots will let you, as Nidus, gain 1/5 of mutation stacks, and yeah, you can scale that pretty quickly. Now, this is where I mentioned it earlier, why it's important that it doesn't relocate. When you recast Ravenous while standing in the current one that you have, it will actually cause all of the maggots to explode as well. So you actually have 2 ways now to manually explode the maggots, which can get very good when you have 500 stacks of mutation. Yeah, it's crazy. Insatiable is the augment. Nidus has a chance to gain additional mutation stacks while in infestations. 60% chance at base, but this chance can also be increased with ability strength that allows you to actually go above 100% chance to gain multiple stacks at once when you are standing in the Ravenous infestation. Very good if you just want to, gain those huge amounts of mutation stacks very quickly. It's good to pair it with abundant mutation. And yeah, this is quite nice if you want to go all in on increasing your damage with mutation stacks. And that is Nidus's abilities as a whole. Pretty interesting to say the least. Now, before we go further, if I could ask that you smash that like button, it goes a hell of a long way for me. Thank you so much. I appreciate your support. How on earth do we play Nidus? Nidus is a bit of a weird one for me, and I say this because before the rework, I always considered Nidus to be a bit like, this is my corner and my camp and my tent with my fireplace. Leave me alone. And don't get me wrong, after the retouch, he's definitely a lot less like that, but he's still kind of like that. And that's okay. He's that type of Warframe, but he's definitely a hell of a lot more active and can move around a hell of a lot easier, which I appreciate, and it definitely has made him a hell of a lot better in my eyes. Nidus pretty much runs on mutation stacks. So your goal is to get your mutation stacks up as much as possible, especially if you're running the respective augments. Best way to get your mutation stacks up is casting down Larva, grabbing a bunch of enemies, and spamming Virulence, his first ability, to build those stacks. You can also then, of course, cast Ravenous, which will only consume 3, but then you're going to regain that so quickly you won't even notice that it's gone. You just want to use your 1, 2, and 4 in order to gain your mutation stacks. That's what you want to care about. That's the most important thing. Parasitic Link can be decided on the fly, whether you want it for your allies, whether you want it for enemies, and so on. When it comes to the allies, though, if you're playing solo, it's a bit more difficult, but the thing that has changed is you can actually now target companions like specters and, free moving companions. I don't know how or what to do with sentinel companions that are above you and if you don't have any duplex bond clones or anything like that. So my suggestion is, if you're running solo, I recommend getting some specters or getting, for example, an encore crew member every now and then to use and utilize Parasitic Link. But yeah, there are options. Basically, you just need to make sure that you have an ally. Parasitic Link for an ally is definitely a hell of a lot better than the damage redirection, although the damage redirection just adds to Nidus's survivability, so it's a win. It's nice to have. But overall, the main thing you want to focus on Nidus is building those stacks, and once you build those stacks, and if you can keep those stacks up, you have a layer of, well, not dying because you have undying, but if you're running abundant mutation, remember that you have a 30-second cooldown, so be wary of that. I will say though, Nidus is very augment dependent. He does need 1 or 2 augments in order for him to feel a hell of a lot better. However, from my observation, he can now do crazy damage with the retouch, so I'm not complaining too much. Okay, let's talk about the budget builds for the players in the star chart or anything like that. Look, there are actually so many ways that you can go about building Nidus. Like I said, he's very, very augment dependent. So whatever augment you decide to go for depends on how you're going to go and build him. This is just a generic, pretty straightforward, like covers all bases for him. We have Summoner's Wrath in. If you have it, if you don't have it, use whatever you have available. That's for the maggots. And as you scale your mutation stacks with Abundant Mutation and Insatiable, you can then benefit from maggots that deal a crap ton of damage. And you have Virulence as well that does so much damage because you have so many stacks. Point being, with the flexibility, for example, as you can see, I have 2 Umbra Former in, so you could, if you wanted to, go for Umbra Fiber and Umbra Intensify, anything like that. You could also do Vitality, a triple Umbra setup. That works too if you'd like to, but yeah, it depends on what you want. All in all though, he's a hell of a lot tankier and he doesn't really need a triple Umbra setup as much as he needed it before. You can still go for it. That's something that's very important to understand. Basically, pick if you want to go all in on mutation, pick if you want to go for, maybe Teeming Virulence, which gives you primary crit chance for weapon or gun buffing, that kind of thing. Or, if you want to do Larva Burst, which is very powerful, by the way, you can also go for that. That I would recommend as well. But it's very flexible and you can just give this a try and you'll see it's pretty easy to build him. He doesn't need too much. Now let's talk about the Steel Path section. Okay, this is where it gets, again, a little bit difficult for me to give you guys an exact build. So I'll explain this one and I'll explain how I'm going about this. We have Insatiable and Abundant Mutation. So we have 500 mutation stacks and we have Insatiable to build those stacks to 500. This allows us to do a hell of a lot of damage with Ravenous and the maggots, and also allows Virulence to do a crap ton more damage as well. We have a bunch of strength so that we can then, of course, enjoy Parasitic Link doing a bunch more damage and the maggots dealing a lot more damage as well. If you wanted to, which I do recommend an option for you, you could drop the Umbral mods and you can instead go for more range or anything like that. That is a good idea as well. The only reason I've gone for adaptation is just because it's here. I mean, if I were you, I would actually do this if you want more range. 1 second, I'll find it. There it is. 175% range is really nice. Larva benefits a hell of a lot when you start using, high range. It's much better because it can still be quite finicky when it's trying to grab enemies because it's based on line of sight. So it's important to be strategic about where you place Larva. I've gone for Coaction Drift and Growing Power. You don't need to go for this. You can use something else if you want. You may be wondering why I'm going for Bellicose and I'm not using the Parasitic Vitality Link augmenting. Reason for this is because I have 2 Archon Shards over here, Towerforged Topaz Archon Shards, which, by the way, even though they don't show in the HUD, they actually do increase your health, and I've tested this and it does. You gain blast damage, or your maggots will deal blast damage, and if they die from the maggots, then this will proc, which allows Bellicose to basically get to the full 72%, which is very nice. 2 casting speed shards, good idea for Nidus, makes him feel a hell of a lot better. Then, if you wanted to go for a Larva Burst setup, which I do recommend as well, with maybe Abundant Mutation or Insatiable, one of the two, and go for more range, so much fun, very powerful. You could also go Archon Continuity if you run that augment too. If you want to go max health, which we have in the next build, don't worry, I'll explain it, you could do that. Another option as well is Teeming Virulence. Go all in on that like red crits and enjoy like a gun buffing setup. You could do that. That's also another option, and you can change the setup according to the augments. Very much so based around what the augments are, and just enjoy, have fun. It's much easier to build now. Let's talk about health maxing. As I explained, over 60,000 health, kind of crazy work if you ask me, and you can also scale that to even higher if you wanted to. I mean, you could use the Grimoire for more strength. There's so many things here that you could use, but this is a no Helminth setup that allows you to do health maxing. What we have here is Parasitic Vitality and Abundant Mutation. We have Arcane Blessing and Arcane Bellicose. More strength means more, increased of Parasitic Vitality with max health percentage. You can use the Grimoire to also increase. And yeah, you can also use many other snapshot mechanics to do that. One thing I will suggest to you guys, if you wanted to, and you don't care too much about one of the other abilities, I do recommend subsuming Blood Altar, which is Garuda's ability, on either Ravenous or Virulence if you don't want to use either one. Reason being is you're going to have so much health, and don't get me wrong, at Base Steel Path, it's very unlikely that you're going to die. You will have a much better chance, or you'll basically regenerate health as a percentage, which is much better because you have so much health. You will not be able to out regen the amount of damage that you take because there's just so much. That is something that I can recommend to you. Or alternatively, you can just use Arcane Grace. That's another option, which we do use later on for other builds, but that is something that you can do. And this can be a no Helminth setup, or it can be a Helminth setup, depends on what you want. Finally, let's talk about the Helminth setup. So for the first one today, we have a Bright Bonnet setup. This is making use of Bright Bonnet. The reason for this is because we are going to use Parasitic Link to increase our ability strength when we link to our allies. And then we're going to use Bright Bonnet to also increase the ability strength of that. And then we're going to relink so that we get more ability strength. Yeah, it's pretty crazy to say the least. It's a good synergy. You have infinite energy sustain. You have huge amounts of strength increases. And we have Arcane Grace on here with Parasitic Vitality. So we're going to have a bunch of health. We're going to have a bunch of mutation stacks, and we're going to have Arcane Grace. You could even drop Adaptation with this setup and use something else if you'd like to. That is definitely an option, and I recommend you give that a go. But you're going to have so much health with this, you're not going to care too much. Next setup is a Summoner's Wrath setup. We're going to be focusing and going all in on our little maggots. We're going to go Summoner's Wrath, Coaction Drift, which now affects Summoner's Wrath, by the way, Arcane Bellicose, and Augmented. We're going to use Insatiable, Abundant Mutation, a bit of range, and we're going to spam Nourish. We're then going to spam Ravenous to get the maggots up. We're going to spam Lava, Virulence, all the things in between, and everything in front of you is going to die. This setup is incredibly powerful for nuking. I do recommend it. It's lots of fun. And it's great. You can also go more range if you want to, and if you want to drop a bit ability strength, then you can absolutely do that. But yeah, it's very powerful. For the last setup for today, this is by far my favorite build of Nidus at the moment, is an Ophanim Eyes setup that is subsumed over our 3. We're going to go for a Larva Burst build instead, and we're going to go for 190% range, and we're going to spam Lava, and then we're going to reactivate it so that it explodes a bunch of enemies in toxin damage, which, by the way, scales to the hundreds of thousands. And because you're using Ophanim Eyes, enemies will be armor stripped, which allows you to do that a hell of a lot easier, which means that they die so much quicker. This is by far my favorite Nidus setup right now, and I cannot recommend it enough to you guys. It is great. You can move Ophanim Eyes to another, ability if you wanted to, but this is the setup that I'm using, and I am loving it. I think this is like the best setup for Nidus right now. The only thing is sometimes it can be a bit squishy because we're not using huge amounts of health, and we don't also have any like actual damage reduction scaling off of this. but you can make do with Ravenous scaling and the health regen from there and how fast you kill enemies. So you can kind of make it work. If you feel like you are dying a lot, you are more than welcome to change the setup to what you want. But yeah, this is something that I do recommend you guys give a try. That is Nidus's builds. I must say, he is definitely a hell of a lot better. I am surprised by how much damage you can do and also how much health you can get with him. He does feel a hell of a lot tankier, which is great. And because of Virulence and the energy regen you get from it, your energy sustain is also very, very good for most of the builds, hence why I don't even have Equilibrium on. But if you feel like you're running out of energy, you can try and change the builds to what you want. Let me know in the comments below how you guys feel about Nidus. What's your thoughts on him? Because yeah, I'm quite impressed, to say the least. Thank you so much for watching. I don't want to waste you guys' time any longer. I appreciate you guys' support. I hope you guys enjoyed it. As always, a huge shout out to our channel members. You guys are amazing. Thank you for your support. I'll see you guys in the next video.